have rocked this country. And we want to ask if the results and the fight against corruption in Ghana has been satisfactory. We know there are oversight institutions that are built to tackle scandals that involve corruption. But have their results satisfied Ghanaians? Have they even produced any results at all? This evening, we're asking those questions. We're speaking with Mensa Thompson, who's Executive Director of ASEPA. That's the Alliance for Social Equity and Public Accountability. We're also speaking with Mr. Yao Sompa, who's a lawyer and is going to be joining us shortly, and Vitus Azim, who's former Executive Director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative, GII. I'm going to be speaking with these gentlemen in a moment. Please stay with us. Spotlight will be right back. My name is Noang Falong. Good evening. Welcome back to Spotlight. How is the fight against corruption going in Ghana? We're going to be opening the phone lines shortly so you can call in and weigh in yourself. In the meantime, I have Mensa Thompson on Zoom. I also have Vitus Azim on the phone. Let me just go to Vitus. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Great. Quickly, can you just give me a quick assessment of what you think about the climate in Ghana and corruption specifically?
Well, I don't think that there's any fight against corruption in this country. If anything at all, it's not a fight by the government.
Right.
Because the government is rather promoting corruption and not fighting corruption.
Is there a reason why you say that, sir?
You just mentioned scandals.
Right.
Things that you don't expect to happen are happening. And nobody is doing anything about it. The president is very silent. I mean, virtually the executive arm is doing nothing. The parliament is supposed to have oversight too. They are not saying anything about it. Sometimes some of them come out to even defend the perpetrators of these acts of corruption. So why would it's not possible to say that there's a fight against corruption on the side of the government. Civil society and the media are doing a bit, but their powers are constrained. They don't have powers to investigate. They don't have powers to prosecute. So they may just make the noise, reveal some of the scandals, but then after 1 week, they are forgotten, and the people continue to enjoy their booty.
Boss's scandal, for example, that's Mr. Ajeni Boateng. He's presently standing trial. Doesn't it show at least some commitment to getting results?
Well, it's just a recent development. I think it was just last week that the Office of Special Prosecutor sent him to court.
Yes. He's been granted bail.
This happened around 2020, right?
Yes, please.
The SHAC did his investigation in 2021, and we have to wait till now to take the matter to court. And the assets that the accounts that were frozen, we are told were defrozen, and then the money has been taken out. So some of these things are half-hearted measures,
Right.
which don't point to the fact that there is actually a fight against corruption, or that we are committed to deal with corruption.
Right, let me just go quickly to ASEPA and bring them into the conversation. Hello, good evening, sir. Mr. Thompson?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. My producer is just saying you should reposition your camera properly so we can get your video correctly. If you could enable auto-rotate, please.
Okay.
Have you gotten that?
Is that okay?
The video is not on, to be honest. So your video is not on at all. So if you could just put that on together with the auto-rotate, that would work. Yes, yes, we have it now. Thank you. So Mr. Azim is saying that he doesn't see a conscious fight against corruption in Ghana. I'm wondering if you share these sentiments or you think contrary.
Of course, there's no fight against corruption in Ghana. at least not in the last 5 years, we've seen a very prevalent, tranches of corruption, with absolutely nothing being done about it by the central government. And so, if anybody says there's no fight against corruption in Ghana, he's right. I mean, I think, to put it bluntly, that is what we are currently being faced with. We are in a corruption crisis. In fact, corruption is more than a pandemic now in this country.
Mr. Thompson, there are many oversight institutions in Ghana. What is preventing them from responding to their mandate?
You see, I think we've all agreed that in terms of the fight against corruption, the retrospective fight has been the easiest of all the battles, and every government that comes into power, engage in some form of retrospective fight against corruption. I think the challenge has been dealing with corruption as and when it happens in the government, by government's own people, apparatchiks, and agents and assigns of the government. I think that's where the problem has been. And so when it comes to dealing with this menace, what you need principally is the political will to be able to take action, even when the action involves persons who are connected to the government. And I think that is what is missing. The outright lack of political will, because without the political will, even if the state offices of accountability decide to take actions to curb the menace, the central government, who is clothed with so much powers, will ultimately interfere in the work of the Office of Accountability. We've seen that in countless occasions. We can talk about the Osafo example, where monies were paid by Pool and Associates to Pool and Associates for absolutely no work done. The Auditor General surcharged the senior minister, and we saw the back and forth with the government, ended up in court. The Auditor General ended up being hounded out of office. There's several of these examples. We've seen the Martin Amidu example, where he in the process of preparing a corruption risk assessment report on the Japa, the finance minister paid a visit to him in an attempt to interfere with the investigation that he was conducting. And I can go on and on and on. And so the lack of political will do not allow the state offices of accountability to even work independently and bring perpetrators to book. And that is why we find this menace thriving and thriving, even though the Office of Accountability with enough powers, marginal resources to handle some of these things.
That's quite an interesting submission. Let me go to Yao Sompa, who's also on the line. Yao Sompa is a lawyer. Let me just check from him if he is reasoning the same as the two of you and Vitus, and then I'll go into further questions. Yao, good evening. Are you on the line?
Hi, good evening, Naya. Yes, I am.
Thank you so much for joining us. Our two other resource persons are saying that the main problem is the lack of political will to tackle corruption cases in Ghana. Do you think this is the main problem?
Okay, so it's interesting to hear my brother Thompson speak, and to hear the other speakers speak. I mean, in the sense of defining corruption and pinning it down to what it comes to, my humble view is more of a cultural dimension, social cultural dimension, rather than even, well, that may sit at the base of what we say is political will. So, hello?
Please proceed, I can hear you.
Yes. So at the base of what sits on the conversation of why we have failed incessantly to fight corruption over many years is, in my humble view, the question of how we're defining it and what we're defining as corruption.
Okay.
In terms of its legal legal terms, I'm not sure there is any question as to what the law says is corruption. For what the law says is corruption, many people on both the left and the right will be guilty of corruption if we had institutions that were very diligent in pursuing that. But the acts have survived many political cycles, although both sides of the aisle have benefited from labelings of corruption. Because, I mean, for most of the things I've seen.
Yeah, give me a moment. I just want to make an input there because you asked what the law says is corruption, right? So let me just give a bit of information on that. Now, Ghana's anti-corruption law primarily is contained in the criminal code. And this criminalizes active and passive bribery, extortion.
Absolutely.
Extortion, willful exploitation of public office. Now, willful exploitation of public office, I think, is where the gray area is, because that can cover a lot. And when you willfully exploit public office to make certain gains, then you have involved yourself in a corrupt practice. You just mentioned the Transparency International definition. Now, in that, Ghana scored 43 points out of 100, but this is the 2021 report. We don't have the 2022 report yet.
Hi, can you hear me? Am I still on the line?
Yes, please. Yeah, have you been hearing us in the last few minutes?
I think the line went off somewhere in between, so I was struggling.
Yes, I lost you.
The line went off somewhere in between, so I was struggling.
Yes, I lost you somehow, but did you hear the reading of what I said corruption was? I mean, according to Ghana's
Ghanaian law. Yes, I did hear what the law said.
So Vitus also made an input there about what Transparency International says. So I'm just going to, let me hear you. Let me hear you land, and then I can take the Transparency International's index.
Right. The point I was making is that for using your office for personal gain is something that can range all the way from hiring people with your office of contracts to friends, and using your office, good office, to get admission for your child to school, or things we have come to know as a functional part of our social status. And for me, that's where the base of the conversation sits.
Okay.
And it is not an excuse for us to benefit from our social structures in a way that we seek to say that corruption is in part a fight against our social cultural arrangement, but in part one that politics can benefit from, because it is then one we can label other parties as corrupt. I think that as a society, we really, really, really need to come. And anytime corruption comes up as a conversation, I'm overly excited, because I think that it gives us as a society an opportunity to reconsider the conversations in the very non-partisan sense that we need to consider it. Because trust me, if you look at the index of corruption and public perceptions of corruption, politicians are not at the top of the list, right? And the perception permeates every structure of our society. Every structure. I mean, from civil society all the way to politicians, to education, to police services, to judiciary. It is a perception that perceives every little part of our society. And I think that that's what we must concern ourselves with if we're going to win this fight, if ever there is a fight against it.
Let me just ask this. Yeah, I mean, yes, that corruption permeates every sector of society, from office to office, from sector to sector. But at what level does it most affect the citizens and Ghanaians? Isn't it at the level of political office?
I would agree that if political persons at the very top are perceived to be corrupt, then of course the consequences would be far more dire, because not everybody holds a national purse. Not everybody has the powers politicians will. So the consequences of the perception of corruption, and indeed if proven as facts of corruption, for politicians are far more significant. But you see, the unfortunate thing is that we all get leaders we deserve. we make the elections for them. We are parties to the corruptees if ever it is that they are friends and family. We condone those acts or otherwise. So
Right.
I think that yes, the consequences of them being perceived as corrupt is far more dire, and indeed, if the facts are proving, are a little more significant if political parties and politicians are. But I still think that the consequences on, for example, the consequences on a policeman being corrupt is that it could be as significant because I mean, take the chances that he will take a bribe and not prosecute somebody who is an armed robber or a serial killer. Take the chances that a driver or a policeman on the way will take a bribe, for example, and let a drunk driver drive and kill so many people. So I can understand the consequences that in terms of public purse and public policy, politicians have a far more significant consequence. But who is to say that all of us don't contribute to the far dire nature of the cost of corruption?
Right. Thank you, Yao. Let me come to Mr. Thompson, who's also still on phone. Mr. Thompson, I'm coming right back to you. Let's take a look at Ghana's Corruption Perception Index in 2021, where we scored 43 points out of 100 points. How do you think we were assessed, and why did we fall so short?
Well, a number of things stems from a number of things stemming from the fact that there are issues of corruption that have rocked the government, and for some time we continuously see the president consistently come out to defend these allegations of corruption. In fact, sometimes even when state offices of accountability are still investigating the matter, precisely prejudicing the issue under investigation. Consistently person activities and nothing happens to them. Not even their job gets taken away from them. And so over the last 5 years, we've seen a brazen sense of corruption. And you see the level of corruption that's happening now, the brazenness, the sheer impunity with which they happen, clearly tells you that now, there's a huge incentive, for corruption. Like, nobody is afraid to engage in these acts anymore. That's principally a problem. And so when international agencies keep seeing these things happen repeatedly over and over again, then they send these reports back to their country, and we get downgraded in all forms of stuff. So we've seen consistently the Corruption Perception Index, our human rights credentials, we've seen the report by the US State Department, we've seen our press freedom rankings. And all these things is because of the inactions of the executive government in tackling this menace. And so, to buttress the point, the sheer lack of political awareness. And I'll give you an example. Have you seen the new bill, the Public Office Holders Bill? The new bill that is being sent to Parliament. This is a bill that is being worked on for the past 2 years. It's a bill that is supposed to resolve this issue about asset declaration.
Right.
Code of conduct for public officers. The weaknesses in our asset declaration regime. I had the opportunity to review the bill, and it's total nonsense. Because the people who are supposed to... okay, I'm trying to find a better word for nonsense.
Yes, please.
Because you see, we have an asset declaration regime. We have asset declaration regime that, that is very opaque, that do not solve the problem which asset declaration regime is supposed to solve. We promulgate a new bill to solve the weakness. And what we do is that we promulgate a bill that is even weaker. That is even going to weaken the current position of asset declaration. We are just happy having lost. And I'm going to, and if you allow me.
Right. Mr. Thompson, I think I'm having issues with your line. It's pretty
pieces of the bill,
yeah.
Especially. Yes, I said if you allow me, I'll read some part of the bill.
Yes, I'd like you to do that, but also position yourself a bit more because we can't even see your face.
Yes, specifically section 12 and 13
right.
of the, yes. Can you see me?
I think it's better now, yes.
Yes, so specifically section 12 of the bill, I'm trying to read the bill from my phone.
Sure, so please go ahead.
You see, clause 12 of the bill requires the Auditor General to keep information obtained under the bill confidential. However, an authorized staff of the Commission may access the information where a public officer is under investigation. The public officer who provided the information, the authorized representative of that public officer or a person authorized by law may also access the information. A contravention of the clause is an offense punishable by fine of not less than 250 penalty units or not more than 500 penalty units, or to a term of imprisonment not less than 2 years and not more than 5 years or both. Again, if you read the clause 13, you say the Auditor General is required under clause 13 to publish in the Gazette a daily newspaper of nationwide circulation on the website of the Auditor General's office a list of public officers who hold an office specified in the first schedule and have declared their asset or defaulted in the declaration of their assets. The publication is to be made each year on the 30th of September. You see, clearly, you have a law that is telling public officers that, look, within 3 months upon taking office as a public officer, you must go to the Auditor General, file a declaration of your assets and liabilities so that we can know what properties you have, what liabilities you have before coming into office, so that we can assess based on your income levels in the public office how much changes in your assets and liabilities have happened, how much in effect, how much wealth you have accrued within the same period, so as not to use your public office to enrich yourself. Now, in Article 286, we are saying that the Auditor General should keep the declaration. And that has been the problem because, for example, Sir John, did we know Sir John's declaration before he assumed office? Now it has even come out that he never declared. But how did we know? How come we didn't know that he never declared? Because it was never made public. And so the weakness in this asset declaration regime is that sort of confidentiality which the politicians have conveniently cloaked this asset declaration regime with, so that when they come into office, we don't know what they have, we don't know how much they have, we don't know what liabilities they have. They come and within overnight, they are billionaires and nobody can question them because even we can't determine how much they had when they came, before they came into office.
Right.
And so this new bill was supposed to address that challenge. And I remember at the retreat of the Constitutional and Legal Affairs Committee of Parliament in the Volta region, who were there, we submitted memoranda on this bill, and one of the things that were very clear that the confidentiality regime of our asset declaration is making the bill ineffective. So let's address that. You come back and then you accept these recommendations, and then when you send the bill to cabinet, you conveniently eliminate the part that says that the declaration should be made public. So you see the lack of political will that we talk about. So the people in power, the people who have the power to change, things, make the necessary reforms for a fight against corruption to be effective, are not willing because they themselves are culpable of these very same things which the law is supposed to address. And that is the problem that we have.
Mr. Thompson, referencing the same issue with the Achimota lands specifically, we know that the law does say they have to declare their assets, but what was the lapse over there? Who did not do their job such that some public officers did not declare their assets?
You see, I think the asset declaration, Article 286 of the 1992 Constitution is very clear that you need to make a declaration within 3 months before you come to office. Within 3 months before, not after. Then, if you read the Constitution, if you read the Shraj Act, the Shraj Act also says within 6 months you have a grace period of 6 months after coming into office. Now, the Auditor General is supposed to keep a registry of the list of people who have filed their declarations, and there's a legal registry at the Auditor General's department which are supposed to keep that records. I understand that in the last 2 years, the declaration upon our investigations revealed that the asset declaration register have been moved from the legal registry of the Auditor General's department to the Auditor General's office. So now, it is like the Auditor General who has autonomy to determine who have made their declaration and who have not made their declaration. Now, the law is weak in effect that it does not give any powers to the Auditor General to count the crime on public officers who have failed to do the declaration. Even when investigations have been conducted by Shraj and found that the officer has failed to declare the asset, the law does not provide any remedy or actions. And I'll give you an example. In 2020, we brought an asset declaration case against Madam Jane Mensah, the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, who is supposed to declare her assets and liabilities under Article 286. She failed to declare her assets 2 years upon being in office. We filed a complaint with Shraj. Shraj investigated her, and indeed, she admitted that at the time we filed a complaint 2 years after taking office, she had not declared her assets and liabilities.
Right.
Even after finding her culpable of breaches in Article 286, Shraj still could not recommend any punitive actions to be taken against her. Why? Because the law does not provide any remedy. And so this Code of Conduct for Public Officers Bill was supposed to address these weaknesses and provide direct remedy and punitive sanctions for people.
Right.
You understand?
Yes,
but
I do understand.
Look at the weak bill they've drafted for all of us.
Yeah. Let me come put Vitus in the conversation. We seem to have him online waiting. But Vitus, my apologies for taking a while to come to you. But still on this particular subject, what do you think, especially of that clause that says this declaration should not be made public, of the revised bill, that is?
The Constitution does not say that it should not be made public. The Constitution says that the Auditor General should put in place measures to operationalize the Act. So if the Auditor General thinks that the best way to operationalize the thing is to put it in the public domain, or even at least to open and verify the declaration to see whether they are true or not, or just a white piece of paper that is put in an envelope and delivered, I think that the Auditor General can go ahead and do that. Some of us have challenged the Auditor General to do that and take it to court by any aggrieved person. But the Auditor Generals, all this time, the Auditor Generals have not been bold enough to do that. Because what's the point? Just take an envelope, a sealed envelope, and give you even a receipt that you have declared your assets. You don't know what is in that declaration. I could have put 5 houses when I have only 1 house on coming to office. Because I planned I was going to loot and build another 4 houses after 4 years. So what is the essence of that act if you don't verify? In some countries, you don't only open to see it, you follow up to identify some of the assets that you have declared.
Right.
If you have declared liabilities, they can also follow up. If they are bank liabilities, follow up and find out whether it's actually true that you have those liabilities. It's just that it's the implementation, the enforcement of the law, I think.
Yeah.
We actually had the meeting with the auditor, with the parliamentarians in 2008 on these three issues. Public disclosure. They said no. The Constitution says no. They interpret the Constitution or the law in a way that suits them. Even the period for declaration, the Constitution says upon assumption of office. Then Parliament decides to pass a law saying that within 6 months, which is not what the Constitution, and the Constitution is supreme. Parliament cannot enact a law that contradicts what the Constitution says. And the Constitution says upon assumption of office. And we have seen people that can take 6 months to acquire assets. So you don't wait for 6 months for the person to acquire assets and include them in his or her declaration. So, and that's why we tend to blame the politicians. Because Parliament has a responsibility to enact laws in the interest of the country. But because they may be affected adversely, sometimes they do it in a way that will please them and the other political people. So that is the thing. We have a good asset creation law. Even the Constitution, Article 287, mandates SHAC to impose sanctions if it is found, if the investigations show that the fellow has not actually declared. But SHAC too has not been able to declare those, to impose those sanctions. When the Chief Justice was being vetted, he admitted openly that he didn't declare his assets when he was an appeals court judge. Yet, he has been made the Chief Justice. Nobody questioned it. Right. And Mr. Thompson gives an example of regime mentor. If he has not declared, SHAC has the mandate to impose sanctions. But SHAC has failed to enforce the law. At least they should have imposed the sanction so that if they don't comply with, then at least the blame will not be on them. But to go on record that it has done that, but SHAC has also failed. In the case of the Chief Justice, said, oh, it didn't happen now when he was being appointed Chief Justice. I don't know whether there is a time limit where you can disobey the law and go free.
Right. Ms. Azim, so beyond this asset declaration law, how else can we improve public trust in public office holders?
Our way of recruiting people, public officers, appointing people to head various institutions, leaves much to be desired. Somebody just decides to announce somebody has been appointed. There's no advert, no screening, no interviews, because you are linked to the president or to the ruling party or some other big people. Your name is mentioned and you are just sent to maybe to the Council of State, which is also another rubber stamp institution. We just say, well, advise that we can go ahead, or Parliament, which will also go ahead and say, well, we think that that's okay, go ahead. So the fellow comes in owing loyalty to the appointed authority. And so the fellow, even if the fellow is not directly asked to do things in a certain way, the fellow himself or herself would feel that I should do it this way to please my appointed authority. Apart from the fact that sometimes they can even directly just interfere. Don't. The other side is the independence of these institutions. You appoint them, they don't have that independence. You don't give them the necessary resources to do the work. And then if there are people who have that integrity that is required for them to do their work well, they themselves can even be found culpable of corruption. So it's not a one-way approach. We need to adopt a holistic approach to the fight against corruption if we are really committed in fighting corruption. We strengthen the institutions, give them the necessary resources, give them the independence to do their work, and then follow up where the sanctions are imposed. Somebody should follow up and enforce those sanctions. But we're not able to do that.
Right.
And that's why I said that we are even promoting corruption and not fighting corruption.
Interesting. We're promoting corruption and not fighting corruption. But let me come back to Yao Sompa. He's also still on the line. Yao, thank you for staying.
Yes, that's absolutely fine. I think that I owe it as an obligation to highlight some issues in law.
Please do.
I've heard Thompson and our senior brother make. I mean, the chapter 24 of our law our constitution is very clear on some provisions that, and I think that both have tried to throw some light in terms of what the law provisions of law on code of conduct of public officers are, and what it is required. Two things I want to highlight is I think that Thompson made a point to say that there is no provision of law in terms of the sanctions. I don't think that is entirely the position. The position is that the law has given discretion to the has given entire discretion to the Commissioner of Human Rights or the Chief Justice, as the case may be, to take actions as he considers appropriate in respect of the results of an investigation. And I just read 287(2). And so to entirely say that there is no, as it were, remedy regime when somebody is found not to have declared his declaration of asset and liability will not be the position of law. What the position of law is that there is a discretion given to two persons, in this case, the Commissioner of Shraj, in all other persons' case. And if that declaration concerns the Commissioner, then the Chief Justice is liable for the process of institution and investigation and causing a remedy to happen. So that I think that is imperative to correct the fact that yes, persons have been labeled and given the discretion to determine what the remedy should be. And it's because of the nature of what we're talking about, I think that the Constitution has given levity to say that depending on the circumstances concerning each other, you have the powers to prescribe what punishment may be appropriate.
Yeah.
But the second thing
yes. In our history so far, have we seen any exercise of these powers or discretionary powers?
Not as far as I know.
Right.
Which of course goes to strengthen the fact that, and I think that I agree entirely with Thompson when he says that the declaration regime has not been the most effective. I think that we've seen too many examples of where people have not declared or the sanctions has not been preferred. It is not to say the sanctions or the persons who are supposed to exercise those powers do not exist, but they just haven't used that discretion given by the law. So it's one thing having the discretion and it's another thing those persons using it. So I think that we need to delineate to say that yes, persons have been given the powers. We haven't seen them, at least I haven't seen them use those powers. But again, I think that another important point of law to note is 286A, which says that a person who holds a public office mentioned in the Constitution shall submit to the Auditor General a declaration. The A says that within 3 months after coming into force of this Constitution or before taking the office, as the case may be. And so it is actually imperative that we understand that since 1992, every person must declare before taking the office. So in the real implementation of this, the question is, why have they been sworn in office? It should actually be a part of the checklist before anybody is sworn into public office. We are the persons who are required to list are set out in 2865. And so we have the President, Vice President, Speaker, Ministers of State, Deputy Minister, Chief Justice, Ambassador, Secretary of Cabinet, Head of Ministries and Government, Chairman and Managing Directors of Departmental, and any other officers that the Auditor General may determine. So the point to be made is that why has it been such that people are sworn into office before we know this? And yet we know that state agencies do conduct background checks of people ascending these places before. Why do we not make it a requirement such that it is even a part of the basis for which they go through a parliamentary process? Why is it not a functional part of the parliamentary process such that their declaration of assets are at least on their files or briefs before they are sworn in, or before Parliament gives their final nod.
Right.
Can I give you the reason?
No, I'll come to you in a minute, Azim.
I just want to give a reason why he's question.
Right. Okay. Okay.
The point is
please give me a moment. Okay.
Parliament acted dishonestly by passing Act 550, giving the 6 months time for the passage of the filing of the return. The declarations.
Right.
So Act 550 contradicts the constitutional provision. But that's what Parliament deliberately did. They gave 6 months upon assuming office for you to declare your absence. And so, by that law, you have not contravened the law. But then, as I said earlier on, the Constitution is superior to that act.
Right, right. Noted.
And I think that Vitus makes a point I agree with in part. I mean, to the extent that Parliament is the master of its own rules, yes, that the provisions of 550 may indicate that you need to, within 6 months, declare to the Auditor General. But nothing stops them from making it a part in terms of their process and procedure for confirming a person in accordance with the Constitution. But again, contradictions in law is something that is rife in many laws. And that's one conversation I've been part of in many circumstances where we have Parliament passing different laws that seems to contradict it. So I don't want us to limit it in this sense. But in terms of the enforcement regime, I'm saying that, yes, the Auditor General is the principal party, but even there are counterbalancing agents. We may say the Auditor General, if even he has failed, the Constitution makes checks and balances is the base of our constitutionalism.
My apologies, but you have to sum up for me in 1 minute.
I'm basically saying that the failure in effort is multiple stakeholders. Parliament, the Auditor General, the executive, the persons who are nominated themselves. And I think that we need to make all these stakeholders work together to strengthen the regime, because if we were solving that indeed, we'll be doing a lot of help in fighting against corruption.
Right. Thank you so much, Sompa. Let me come to you, Vitus. So we say it's a multiple stakeholder failure, this failure to fight corruption effectively. What are you saying? Give me in 1 minute, please. We're out of time.
Yeah, well, I agree with him. It's multiple failure because SHAC has a responsibility to actually sanction people who have not filed. But then we the citizens need to report when we know someone has not filed.
Right. But
how will you know if the Auditor General does not disclose those who have filed? We have challenged the Auditor General, at least publish the names of those who have filed, so that we can now use that to identify those who have failed to file. The Auditor General has failed to do that. But even you, the President, who has appointed these people, and you are swearing them in, why don't you make it a condition?
Right.
You Parliament that are vetting these people, why don't you make a condition as you said? But you asked a question about the CPI,
right?
Where we scored 43.
Thank you.
We scored 48 only in 2014. So 48 was only scored in 2014, and since then we have never gone back there.
Right. Thank you, Vitus. I wonder what the score is going to be in 2022, and going into 2023. I hope we are able to stabilize our corruption issues and be seen to be out there strongly fighting corruption. My name is Nwang Falong. This is Spotlight. We spoke with Mensah Thompson, who is Executive Director of ASEPA, that's the Alliance for Social Equity and Public Accountability. We spoke with Sompa, who is a lawyer and joins us here quite often. Also, Vitus Azim, former Executive Director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative, Ghana. Thank you for staying with us this evening. See you same time, 5 o'clock tomorrow evening. Good evening.